We good to go?
Not quite. It's just buffering right now. Sometimes YouTube's really quick. Okay, you are live.
All right, wonderful. Agenda item number 1, call to order the Finance Committee special meeting of October 18th, 2021. Any announcements from you, Christina, or we move over to agenda item number 2?
We do have announcements, sorry. Assembly Bill 361 suspends certain provisions of the Brown Act, allowing public meetings like this to be held by teleconference to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. At this time, I would conduct the roll call and ask the chair to recognize me afterwards for certain matters of the record. Let's see. Vice Chair Perkins?
Here.
And Chair Zafar?
Here.
Thank you. Based on the responses to roll call, the record should reflect that all committee members can hear the proceedings clearly. If there are no objections, the record will further reflect that each committee member believes, based on voice or facial recognition or otherwise, that the persons representing themselves to be committee members are in fact committee members. Seeing no objection. Seeing no objection, I'll turn the meeting back over to the chair with a reminder that all votes must be taken by roll call.
Right, thank you. Item number 2, public comment. Public comment at special meetings is limited to the item described in the notice. Comments should not exceed 3 minutes. Do we have anybody in the public who would like to comment?
It does not appear that we have anyone of the public. It looks like they're presenters or staff.
Right, so we can go ahead and close public comment. Item number 3, new business. 3.1 Aspenwood Venture LP Affordable Housing Trust Fund request. Staff report by Debbie Chamberlain, Community Development Director. Over to you, Debbie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Zafar and Vice Chair Perkins. I'm here today to present a request from Aspenwood for a loan from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Aspenwood is a fully entitled project and nearly ready to be built. However, due to COVID-19 and escalating construction costs, the applicant is seeking tax-exempt bonds for the construction of a 122-unit all-affordable project at 60% or below the area median income for an all-affordable term of 55 years. As background, on September 5th, 2017, the Planning Commission approved the construction of 95 apartments with 13 units provided low and very low income seniors. On November 14th, following a call for review, the City Council ratified the Planning Commission's decision. The proposal would result in 122 restricted affordable units in contrast to the 13 that were approved with the 95-unit project. All units would count towards our regional needs housing allocation. While the project is fully entitled and nearly ready to be built, the total construction budget exceeds $55 million. Aspenwood has applied and appears well positioned to secure tax-exempt bonds from the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee. As a part of their financing strategy, Aspenwood is requesting a $10.5 million commitment from the city for the construction of the project. With the projected increase in the housing fund within lieu fee payments from the Freer Preserve Neighborhood 5 and other development projects, the city has begun to look for opportunities to promote affordable housing. On March 23rd, the council approved funds to assist the purchase of a townhome at Park Central and create a perpetual resale restriction, meaning as the house sells, the resale restriction resets. So if it sells in 10 years, it resets for another 30 years. So the unit would be affordable in perpetuity. And that purchase cost the city about $189,000. Presently, the cash fund for the cash available from the fund is about $4.3 million, with a year-end projection of about $4.5, including personal cost and the proceeds from the Park Central townhome. As mentioned, Aspenwood is requesting a commitment in the form of a $10 million loan from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is more described in attachment A to your staff report, and the applicant will do a presentation after the completion of mine. The loan would be structured as a 30-year loan of $6 million at a deferred simple interest rate of 0.75, a 30-year loan of 4.5 to be forgiven at loan term at a rate of 0.75%. Project modifications will be required to convert the 95-unit project to 122 plus 1 manager unit. The 2-bedroom units would be converted to 1-bedroom and studio units. The gym would be converted to what's called a club room, and where folks could gather, and a 1-bedroom unit. The 90 parking spaces as approved with the original project would remain. As I've mentioned, the housing fund is below the 10.5 million needed for the project. The FRIA Neighborhood 5 development agreement has a requirement to pay in lieu fee of $9 million on a per unit basis to be collected at each close of escrow. Toll Brothers is anticipating that the first close of escrow will occur in June of 2022 and the last in February of 2025. The fund balance, if no funds are expended, would be about $13.5 million at that point in time. In total, the city would utilize the 10.5 million to create 122 extremely low, very low, and low income units for a term of 55 years, which equates to a cost about $86,000 per unit. While the fund balance is anticipated to grow to 13.5 million, between the Aspenwood commitment and personnel costs, use of the fund will be limited for any future funding requests until additional revenue is received. 5-year projections anticipate collection of an additional 1.3 million. However, these funds are not guaranteed and are dependent on construction projects moving forward and have not been factored into the projected fund balances before you today. Included in your staff report is a fund balance projection to demonstrate one example to prevent the fund balance from going negative to meet the needed loan payments to Aspenwood following the receipt of the FRIA preserve fees. However, the first payment would draw the fund balance to $500,000 with a projected low of about $130,000 in fiscal year 24. If the fees are not received upon the FRIA's anticipated absorption schedule, the city would still be obligated to make the loan payments to Aspenwood, requiring the use of general fund monies. While the general fund is currently well positioned, the payment may impact the general fund reserves, drawing below the reserve policy to maintain reserves at 36% worth of the prior year's general fund operating expenditures, which would activate the reserve policy and the need for a plan to bring the general fund back to its reserve level. As presented, Neighborhood 5 development agreement has newly required $9 million. With the FRIA project currently under construction, there is the increased likelihood of project completion funds received when compared to an approved project where building permits have not been issued. Finally, since Aspenwood will commit future revenues and defer the payment of the city development impact fees until 2024, the committee should weigh this request as to how this approach may impact future requests, as well as determine the acceptable risk to the general fund should receipt of the housing funds be delayed to unforeseen circumstances. So following the applicant's presentation, staff is requesting the committee provide direction to the city council and staff. And so at this time, I can answer any questions if you like, or I'm available for questions following the applicant's presentation.
Scott, unless you have any questions, we can move to the presentation.
No, let's hear the rest, and then we'll ask questions. At least I will. Okay.
So we'll be bringing in, I believe, Jeff Woods, Sean Carpenter, and Robert Storer.
Good evening, good afternoon, members of the council and staff. Thank you. My name is Sean Carpenter. I'm from Standard Communities. We're a Los Angeles-based affordable housing development and apartment owner with over 12,000 units nationally. We've spent a considerable amount of time this year working on this Aspen Woods venture, along with Jeff Woods and Robert Storer, who are here on the call today, to try to strategize a way to take a for-profit market rate, excuse me. I have for-profit and nonprofit on my mind because that was what I was doing before this meeting. A market rate development and turning it into an affordable housing complex for seniors for this area. Something that we know from our research is desperately needed in this locale. The presentation, as Debbie just mentioned, and of all of the items that we've listed includes 122. It's technically 123 units under California Debt Allocation Committee rules. We have to have one of those units has to be reserved as a manager unit. but 13 of those units will be at 30% of the area median income. 13% will, 13 of those units will be at 50% of the area median income, and the balance, 96 units, will be at 60% of the area median income, allowing the city to take full advantage of the RHNA goals that have been set forth, or the new goals that have been set forth by the state. We applied back in May to CIDLAC and to TCAC for a 4% low-income housing tax credit, tax exempt bond allocation, and we were not. Right now, tax exempt bond allocations are very competitive in California and in about 17 other states across the nation, and so it becomes a very competitive process. And the way in which you were able to receive, which would be in this case be roughly $35 million worth of bonds and debt, is to lower the amount of tax exempt bonds you're requesting and increase other sources, generally from a municipality. And that's exactly what we've done here. Is we've asked the city to participate like we've done in many other cities around the country. Generally to the tune of a subsidy, the way we've set forth. We've spent a considerable amount of time with staff, the city manager and staff from the community development office, and very much appreciate all of the hard work. I know this is a new concept for the city of San Ramon, and it's actually a new concept for so many cities in California now, as they approach this RHNA goal and try to find ways to use their existing trusts and their linkage fees to develop housing. This is a production of 123 new units in the city of San Ramon, and that will meet all those goals, as I've stated before. So we worked very hard on this, and generally speaking, these funds are fully forgivable in that the applicant would come in and ask that they be forgiven in 30, 40 years. Here, through our work, we've found ways to structure the debt so that the city can actually gain back and take some of these funds back in 30 years as this project becomes more capitalized and ends its affordability period in 55 years, but also allows that fund to continue to grow over time. So we've made an application. We've worked alongside the city as they developed a proposal of this housing trust, the housing trust policy, and we're very excited to be able to get this thing in the ground. We're confident that we're going to see an allocation in December. We're very hopeful. We know our score, and we know that we've scored very competitively against all the other projects in the Bay Area region that we're applying in. So we're really excited about this, and we appreciate your support on this. And I'll answer any questions that you may have about this project or affordable housing in general.
Thank you, Sean. Robert, did you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to sort of tee this up initially here to try to explain to the Finance Committee on how we got here. Jeff and I purchased this property from the city of San Ramon, and we entitled 95 units, of which 13 were going to have an affordability component. When Jeff and I tried to price this project out and include some additional affordable units, we just could not make the numbers work. It just would not pencil out. We had an opportunity to meet with Sean Carpenter of Standard Companies, and he proposed that this project could be 100% affordable by using state and federal dollars to subsidize this project. So it's almost unheard of when we thought that we could get this thing to 100% affordability. And if you look on page 3 of the staff report, I don't know where you'd ever see those kind of numbers on a project. Usually we would do one of two things. A builder would grudgingly accept the inclusionary housing numbers or the percentages, which is either going to be 10 or 15%, or they're going to either do a density bonus of 30 or 35% and accept the 10% affordability. What we did here was we wanted to include additional housing, not only because of our relationship with Danville and the city of San Ramon. But, Jeff and I thought that doing the right thing here would be to increase the number of units. We never dreamed that we could get 100% of the units affordable. So if you look at the 30%, my math may be a little off, but we're serving the $27,000 a year income family up to about $49,000 in an area that's considered affluent and almost unheard of. To increase the number of affordability units, we had to sign up with Standard and learn a process that I'd never seen before. Fortunately, Debbie actually understood this process and wrote a staff report that actually exceeded our expectations. It says exactly what it's supposed to say, except for one thing. We're not going to drain the city's affordable housing trust fund, so we're going to keep that a positive fund. And what Sean is going to explain is how we're going to bridge this. So if you look at our timeline, we receive one payment in March of next year, and then we don't receive any other payments until the 23, and then the final payment in 24. But we'll have this project done at the beginning of 23. So Sean, I don't know if you want to step in and explain the bridge process here, but Sean of Standard Companies is actually bridging this loan.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Robert. It's an interesting dynamic in that, generally when we go into a city, we'll make an application and the city will say, okay, well, we'll give you all of this, and then you get it at closing. And we anticipate if we receive our funding from the California Debt Allocation Committee in December, we have to close this deal within 180 days, or we lose the bond allocation. So we would generally try to seek as much of the city resources as possible up front. But after talking to Debbie and with staff, we've really understood that this is a process of building this trust, the Affordable Housing Trust. And so what we did was we just cycled into our even though we're only requesting $26 million in tax exempt bond allocation, we're getting an additional $13 million in recycled bonds from the California Municipal Finance Agency to bridge the 10.5, well, a portion of the 10.5 and some other funds. We're also putting our own funds into this deal to the extent that we're allowed, because there are caps on that as well. And so we're putting some of those funds in there. So all in all, the answer to the long answer to the short question is we're bridging roughly 6.5, a little less than that because of the fee deferrals. So the fee deferral is actually considered money up front. So, and it gets us additional points on the scoring sheet because the city of San Ramon is providing funding at closing, the $4 million plus the fee deferral. It gets us our maximum points from what they call leveraging city funds. So we'll be able to benefit from that as well. So we're really excited. We took a long time to really figure this out and to put the best foot forward. And I think come March, we will be in the ground on this, and it'll be something that the city can really celebrate.
I'll just add to that if you look at the timeline, the first monies are expected to be issued on March 16th, 2022, which is the $4 million. We're going to start construction because, as Sean mentioned, it's 180 days. It's either we either lose it or we have to start. So that looks like a May 1st start. And then we have 16 months of construction. And then we don't get a second check until January 4th, 2024. And then the final payment on December 1st. So another year after that, we'll get the final payment. So that's where the bridge loan comes into place here. So in this actually helps the city of San Ramon sort of recoup some assets and build up their trust fund again from the FRIA properties.
Okay. Anything else? Jeff, do you want to add? And you're on mute.
No, I think Robert and Sean said it all. If there's other questions, we can answer them after you guys throw out your questions.
Wonderful.
Or just make a motion to approve, one or the other.
I let Vice Chair Perkins ask his questions first.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on mute.
Nice try, Robert. Sean, can you explain your level of confidence on getting the state bond money and why you are confident?
I would love to explain that, Vice Mayor. I actually, it would take me a very long time to explain the nuances, but I think I understand what you're asking, and I could probably cliff note it a little bit. So they have something. There's a scoring process. You can get up to 120 points on the scoring. And in May, we received 119 points. We lose a point because it's a senior property. So we get 119 out of 119 points in our May round, but so did a whole bunch of other projects. Now, some projects scored as low as 70, some scored 60. Aspen Woods, Standard as a whole, and I'll take credit because I'm the only one here from Standard, but really we have a team in Los Angeles that is just phenomenal with working with the state agencies and making sure that we match up their scoring sheet perfectly, and that's how we design these projects and work with the design teams to make sure that they work out. So we knew we would only get 119 points of the possible 119 points. So that was foregone. So the next group is a much smaller component of us go into the next round, which is the tiebreaker round. And then that's a calculation of it basically is you add in the state tax credits, plus the tax exempt bond, plus any other funds that you receive, say if we receive money from HCD, and you divide it by a weighted average of units. So in this case, we divide it by 118 units because the Bay Area is considered a high cost area. And we also get an additional 70%. We take a 30% deduction in those costs because of the wage rates. Okay, so overall we get a reduction in the units on the denominator, and we also get a a reduction in the numerator because of the high cost area that the Bay Area, and because East Bay is really considered all part of that. It's the highest cost area in the state, and so that's how the calculation is done. In May, our tiebreaker score was competitive. It was just roughly around 220,000. It was around 220,000. I don't know exactly. I don't remember exactly what it was. $220,000 per unit. We needed to get to. We felt like because the process was becoming so competitive, and because we were going into the third round of the year, coupled with the fact that we know that in this round, $200 million worth of rail bonds of this rail that was supposed to be developed between Los Angeles and Las Vegas is not going to be done, and they're not going to utilize 2022 bonds. So they could reallocate those to housing. So we knew we could benefit from that, and by doing so, we backed into the calculation, saying, okay, to Debbie and to the team, listen, guys, this is what we're going to need. If we want to get this done, this is going to be the number. We can make it work if we can bridge it, but we'll get there. So we're going in with a tiebreaker score of, and I'm just looking at it on my screen here. It's around 165,000 per unit. And we know just from looking at the preliminary score sheets that it's essentially us and one other development. And we expect that if the same amount of developments get funded this time around as the last time around, it'll be a toss-up between us and the other team. If those $200 million in bonds are allocated equally across the regions, the Bay Area, the Inland Empire, et cetera, then we will definitely get allocated. So now, of course, if we don't get allocated in December, then this was an exercise, and we'll do our best to convince Jeff and Robert that we need to go one more round. But if that's not going to happen, that's not going to happen. But I feel really good about this round. But again, it's a government agency, so I can never predict.
What's the decision date? When will you know the results? And
Yeah, so December 8th is the official SIDLAC committee meeting, and that'll be when it's voted on. The staff will make recommendations sometime between now and November. We figure sometime between now and November 3rd or 4th. And so that's why the time crunch is here upon us to get this approved, because we can't finalize this process. For instance, we couldn't get approved if this council were to say, hey, we're not going to approve this time around. Let's wait, think about it, or whatever. We would actually pull our application because we can't get approved and not have the city funds there.
Okay.
So
The flip side of that is, okay, we approve it, but you don't get funded. We're out nothing at that point, I assume.
right, that's correct.
Okay, so this package is contingent upon you getting funded through the state bond financing. And that's and we'll know that answer first or second week in November. It's highly likely that the committee would accept the staff report.
We'll have we'll need a commitment letter.
Well, no, I understand that. But we know the commitment from the state based upon the staff report, because the committee normally approves the staff report as presented. You said November, the first week in November, the staff report.
Oh, yeah. I was confusing the city of San Ramon's staff report. Yeah, no, the staff recommendations from California Debt Allocation Committee, I don't know of a time that they've gone against it.
Okay. Question for Debbie. Is there no housing trust money coming from the City Walk project anywhere?
City Walk is constructing the units. And if there's a for sale product such as the BR6, it'll be a little shy of $1 million coming in from that project, but it's yet to be approved. So we're trying to show the committee a conservative loan balance going forward. But as I mentioned, there will be some commercial developments coming in that will generate additional $1.3 million. So there's potentially another 2.3 that we just haven't shown because they're not secured yet.
Okay, so the July of 2024, $130,000 balance is your most pessimistic view of our fund balance going forward.
Right. As you know, there's a development agreement with Faria Neighborhood 5, and so they're required to pay those funds, and also they're under construction now. So I'm pretty sure they will complete construction and follow through with their commitment. But beyond that, we don't have a document that locks a developer into the payment of fees. Now, BR6, if they're approved, those fees will come in from 2024 to 2029. So, but that could be a while down the road too.
Okay. And the BR1 senior housing project doesn't create any trust funds?
They will generate commercial linkage fees, but I don't know. Lauren, do you have that amount? Now that you're on the meeting, you can answer the question. Do you know what that potentially will be, or you have not calculated it yet?
We have not calculated yet. We're still doing some research as to whether independent living units can count toward RENA or fee out through that program, or commercial linkage fees. So we're looking at a couple of options and getting information from the state.
Is the answer from that BR1 project, could the answer be zero trust fund dollars? Or is that number, it's a positive number, but we just don't know what it is?
I suspect it will be a positive number. We just don't know what it is.
Okay. The fact that this is, our portion is $88,000, excuse me, $86,000 per unit, compared to the $189,000 that we spent to buy that 3-bedroom unit. By the way, did that sell?
We are doing renovations to the unit right now before
Yeah.
it goes up for sale.
Okay. The $86,000 per unit is that's a pretty good price for us, I see. Do we get any? Is our loan? What kind of collateral, or is there collateral for our the loan?
Well, the collateral would be like anyone purchasing, getting a loan and defaulting on it, right? There's a long line of folks to be repaid. So it's hard to predict if something were to happen to the project and we put our money in, we may or may not get it back.
I can just add some color there if you'd like.
Thank you.
So on a low-income housing tax credit project, a foreclosure of any type would institute a recapture of the federal low-income housing tax credit. In any deal structure like this, we have a lender. In this case, it's the holder of the tax exempt bonds, and then we have an investor, someone who buys the low-income housing tax credits. They're at no point, and I've been doing this 22 years, I have never seen a foreclosure of a low-income housing tax credit project, because both the investor and the debt holder will always step in and do what they call a deed in lieu to remove bad operations. In this case, the only thing that would cause a default would be, for some reason, we weren't able to rent up the 122 units, which every market, and there's a market analysis in your package, will tell you that's not going to happen.
We have some experience with that on the Vista project, Debbie?
Valley Vista Senior Housing, we had a waiting list from the day it opened, I think. So.
Yeah, and I know that from what I hear, that project always is fully subscribed. So the vacancies are filled rather rapidly. Yeah, with the income strategy that you've identified against the AMI, the likelihood of having empty units is really, really small. I think that answers my questions. For now, I may come up with another one, but Sabina, thank you.
Thank you. So I have a few questions, Debbie. One is that we are projecting, right, that these funds will come at a certain date. So if we were to commit the 10 million plus to Standard today, or to the project, Aspenwood project, and the funds were not to come in, something was to be delayed, right? And we get to January 24, we don't have any money. Where are we going to get the money from?
That would be the general fund. So if we make a loan commitment and the loan payment comes due and there's not sufficient funds in the account, then the general fund would have to cover that loss.
Okay. So we're kind of putting a little bit of a risk on the general fund and saying that, if you don't have this, we still have to meet our obligations because we've committed to this.
Correct. And when you looked on the projections I put in your packet, when you see the FRIA payments, I just pulled it up actually, you see a lump sum. And so rather than, I can't estimate when a unit's going to close. So based on Toll Brothers absorption schedule, I just did them by year because they gave me 4 years of when the unit. So money will be trickling in throughout those years. They're not lump sum payments. So there's a potential that 130 may not be that low because we received a few other payments from the FRIA Preserve project too.
We also currently have a balance of 4.5 million, and our first payment is for 4 million.
Correct. So that was one of my negotiation points with them, is I couldn't have the fund drained on day one.
So if I could ask the next question, it's around, so will total expected fund balance at the end of it all would be, looks like about 13 million or so?
If we were to take the 4.5 we projected for the end of this fiscal year and collected all the FRIA monies and did nothing, you would have some staff cost drawdown, because we do fund a portion of a planner out of those funds, but that would be the only use of the funds. So it'd be about, I'd say probably close to about 13.2, honestly, with the staff costs, if I, thinking it through.
Okay. And so if we were to put all the money into one project, we really wouldn't have a whole lot left if there was somebody who comes with the same structure and kind of wants us to lend them the money.
That is correct.
So are we setting ourselves up also for, a precedence for something that we may not be able to commit to with other affordable housing builders?
By using all the funds now, it will make it difficult to really entertain another opportunity, unless it's like a townhome purchase like we just done, or maybe it's working with a bridge housing and they need a lower amount. But the fund, as Vice Chair Perkins mentioned, the fund is going to rebuild itself over time, right? So we will be adding additional revenues into the fund over time. So potentially we'd be able to do another project maybe in 5 or 6 years, just hypothetically. But of the $10 million range, I'm not sure, it would take a while to reach that. I don't see another FRIA in the picture with that level of fee payment that we're receiving.
Yeah, and with our ordinance now, we are pushing developers more and more to build that 15% housing because it's overall going to be cheaper. So if something like you said, FRIA doesn't come along, we may not be able to rebuild. I mean, yeah, those are my concerns in terms of the amount. I certainly want to see what we can do, how much we can help in terms of building this project. I think, it's much needed and it's really structured well, but I am a little bit concerned about the amount, the 10.5 million, or, what we are saying, putting it into just all into one project and then not having funds left. And secondly, just putting at risk our general fund. And, because then a lot of it is projections and I don't know how much do we have in the reserves right now. Kelly, if you know, is it 18 million? Is it in our general fund reserves right now? How much do we have there?
Yeah, I want to say it's about 18 or 20 million.
Yeah. And so that means we are going to start, if we don't have that money, just based on projections, we don't get that money, we need to draw down on our reserves, and that's going to bring our reserves under the balance that we'd set at 36%. So as we make this decision, I want to make sure we're looking at all of these scenarios as well. And based on that, what the best option would be to help move this forward, as well as not put ourselves at risk based on projections, because who knows? The pandemic, nobody knew it was going to hit us. Something happens in 2 years. There's an economic downturn. FRIA decides not to build and stop building for, so that's the thing with forecasting. I've always seen, right? You can forecast, but there's not 100% certainty. And what will be the risks if the forecast doesn't go in the direction that we were hoping?
Had another, interesting article in today's newspaper that Fremont City Council chose to raise their affordable housing fee to $44 per square foot from, it was in the what, $16 to $18 per square. Lauren, it looks like you saw the same article. I found that interesting. They want to encourage their builders to build the affordable units rather than pay the fees going forward. And so by raising the in lieu fee substantially, it does one of two things. You either build the units or you pay the fee. And if you pay the fee, you're paying a much bigger fee, which feeds your trust fund. Or if you build the units, you are meeting your housing needs through the builders going forward. I found that to be an interesting thing, and I'd recommend that staff look into that a little bit more to see how that's look at their staff report and see what they said, because it there was actually a couple of council members that wanted to raise it even higher, but they got a majority to vote at $44 per square foot for the in lieu fee. I found that very interesting.
I was going to ask Sean. Sean, you mentioned there were other cities that have done this. Can you give examples of, what their funds were? How did they make it work?
Yeah, it's a great question, Counselor. I mean, I know that the affordable housing policy was written off of the city of Oakland. I know that Oakland has a standard housing subsidy round every year. San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, and then most of the time it's cities over 50,000 people will start to create these funds. I don't want to say what I'm about to say because it's going to make it look like I'm pushing you in the wrong direction. But but I'll tell you, some cities will actually borrow money to meet these goals, and they float a bond to support their affordable housing goals. That I've seen that happen in some areas around the country, not necessarily in California. I know in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, they just borrowed $400 million to allocate in this way to affordable housing goals. New York does the same thing. Virginia, the state of South Carolina is now raising additional revenue for a tax credit program that has blossomed because of the great need for housing. So the answer to the question is it varies. We were very specific to try to keep our subsidy under $100,000 on the city side, because I know that particularly when Debbie was putting this policy together, I mentioned, hey, check out some of the other big cities around the area, and you'll notice they generally put caps at around 100,000 or 125,000, depending on the high cost area, and that's how they build their reserves over time in these trust funds. But keep in mind too, and I just to go back to another point, is to get a deal. If an affordable housing developer came in tomorrow, say I had an additional piece of land and I want to get it done, it's going to take me a year to 2 years just to get it entitled. And then under the demands of either the TCAC, the Tax Credit Allocation Committee of California, or SIDLAC, it's going to take another year or two to get funded. So 5 years from now will be your next large scale development project of this size. That would probably be around the time that you'd get it. Maybe you might get it in 3 years, but by the time it gets fully funded and whatnot. So your 5-year projection is actually not a bad thing to really start rebuilding this up. And I'm speaking more of an affordable housing practitioner than as an applicant here, because I know this will cause some trepidation about going forward with this type of deal. But these deals are really difficult, and if they weren't difficult, everybody would be doing them. And unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot of affordable housing developers around the country who are willing to go through this process.
Thank you. Kelly, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that as of June 30, the general fund reserve level is at 19.1 million.
At this point, I'd like to recommend that we support this and forward it to the city council. We aren't looking at any opportunities for very low and low affordable housing in the near future that I'm aware of with these kinds of numbers. We're looking way out into the future. I'm not quite sure what the mix is going on City Walk, but those are not being financed by the city. Those are being financed by Sunset and however they're managing that. We may get credit for those, but we're not going to be financing those. So he said, we're at least 3 to 4 years away from another project of this type, because we don't have any housing projects that are of this scale that are likely to come up anytime soon. Is that right, Lauren and Debbie? There's nothing out there that's.
I thought Rome, what is the status on Rome?
Rome is ready to issue permits, but they're still trying to obtain funding for their project too. The apartment projects are kind of all in this situation. When COVID hit, a lot of the lenders kind of walked, and then with the rising construction costs, it's been hard to make them pencil.
And how many units what was their mix?
169, and it was a mixed income project. So it was market rate down to low income, I believe.
Which means how many affordable did they have?
15% affordable, and then they had a 10% fee out.
Okay, so they were not 100% affordable. I mean, I have my concerns of committing dollars that we don't have right now. So I would like the city council to take a look at that as a whole. That we are making some forward-looking decisions and recommendations if we go through with this, and look at the risks and how much of the risk is the city willing to take on. Debbie, you had something?
I just want to clarify one more item. I think we glossed over it. If in the projections we show that part of the 10.5 is the deferral of the city's development impact fees, correct? And so of that, remember, is also our park impact fee. So some of the capital improvement projects will maybe have to be put on hold with the deferral of those fees. So if Aspenwood does not go forward at all, either with this support or on their own, those fees will not be collected until 2024 if the project does go forward with the loan from the city. But there will be a ripple effect on the improvements being brought forward. And also if the funds were paid out, if it was the council's decision to pay the impact fees ahead of time to get those projects going, the fund would go negative too. I have to clarify that when Robert mentioned the impact fees were part of the $10.5 million commitment.
So say that again. I didn't quite get it.
Yeah, so we're deferring development impact fees as part of the $10.5 million commitment, which means if we're not receiving those funds when anticipated, those improvements that are programmed in the CIP will be done later on. So park improvements that are scheduled would be pushed out to future years. If it was the council decided they wanted to pull from the housing fund the impact fees sooner than later, then there's the potential that the fund would go into the red, depending on what additional funding may be collected over the years too.
And is there a number other than 10.5 million that can work at all, which would put us which wouldn't put us at as much risk?
I mean, I guess I could answer that. The 10.5 million is the number. It's also, yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to make it work. We've played around with this a number of different ways, and that's the number that we came back at. And
I can jump in here. So We tried. Look at, it's a big number, but we did try to get it to be less. But if we want to get selected and we want this to work, it's 10.5, unfortunately. Debbie, Joe, we've negotiated this back and forth and tried to get less, but it's just, what we've done basically is the bridge is kind of accomplishing, Sabina, what you are asking. Is that we're only taking $4 million of that dollars up front. Normally we would need all 10.5 right away. So we're going to bridge it and use our own money to help bridge that. In regards to the fees, I mean, if we don't build this thing in the next 3 to 5 years because of construction costs and so forth, there would be no fees anyway, right, Debbie? Yeah, that's what you said. I mean, you're going to get it eventually if we build it. If we don't build it for a while, you're not going to get them. So that's anyway. So
Sabina, as you know, we did start with the $4.5 million. Went to the group that made the decision, and we were shot down. Then we came back, reassessed, we sat down with Debbie, Joe, and staff, trying to figure out where do we need to be exactly, and what date do we need to make this decision by. So November 3rd was the date that was like a drop dead date that had to happen, or this project goes away. And $10.5 million was the least amount of money that we could take that actually would make this project work, or at least get to that approval level. So, we went from 4.5, didn't work. We're at 10.5 now. It's $86,000 a unit, which I still think is incredible. And we have a project in front of us that literally no one would ever do. I'll back up a little bit. When you asked about builders coming in and doing this, and are we going to be short money? Who in the world would do this? Now, even with Bridge, when we did it in Danville, we had to buy all the 6 lots, and we had to sell it to Bridge for $1. We're using our own money on this. So along with Sean, so 10.5 is the number.
And can I just add one more comment? During COVID, when you had a whole slew of builders and developers around the country and in this area not building, not being able to secure financing, Standard Communities acquired roughly 6,000 units through financing, through whether it was construction financing or permanent financing or acquisition funding or investor capital. So Standard Communities is well positioned to handle this development, and we're excited about that. I mean, obviously, as we get beyond this pandemic, hopefully in the coming year, that our job will become that much easier. But we've been here, we've been very active in developing and acquiring affordable housing when nobody else wants to do it, and even during a pandemic, while everybody's working at home. So we're committed to doing that again, and we really hope to get it done here.
Hey, Debbie, just so I can look at these numbers one more time. And Sabina, I think that the risk part is interesting, because really the risk is to the general fund. If there was no money from FERIA that came in at all, that leaves the general fund risk of $4.7 million, because the other is a fee deferral. So, even if half of that came in, I mean, it seems like the risk is pretty low to the general fund, which was one of your concerns.
Yeah, and my recommendation is, right, when the city council looks at it, they have the pros and the cons in front of them. And, we clearly look at all of this and then, make the best informed decision. Like I said, we all want to build this, we really appreciate that, we're going to get 100% affordable housing through this, but we're also looking out for the city and, what's going to happen in the next few years. So I want to make sure, kind of the city council weighs both options, looks at all of this, and then, whatever we come up with, if you're ready to take the risk, we're ready to take the risk. So I would recommend that, we go to the council with, what we've talked about and then make the decision there. Scott, is that fine with you?
Yes, my recommendation is that the council accept this proposal and move forward. If it gets funded, then it gets funded and off we go, and we get our 122 units that frankly are going to be hard to come by. The state's pressing hard on us for RENA numbers, and if we don't show some level of progress, the state has actually targeted some cities that are showing little or no progress. And so I think by showing some progress in what I think is a prudent way, we can move forward.
And is there an opportunity from the state to get any funding at all because we're doing something like this, or we're too small of a city to, get that kind of attention?
So Governor Newsom announced a week ago some additional affordable housing provisions, and that the Housing Community Development Division will be providing both technical assistance to cities and towns across the state, but also potentially some additional funding through HCD resources in the form of CDBG and home. You're also should be receiving an increase in home allocations from your federal government. I don't know if that's happened yet. Debbie probably can talk to that, but that should be increasing as well through ARPA, and then we have a whole federal reconciliation package that's going to also increase the amount of funds coming to the state as well. So it's the demand will be there for the funds, but the amount of developers developing this housing, you think about how many levels we have to go through to get these done, and if we were able to put private equity into this, we could probably do that. But unfortunately, the tax structure doesn't work. We can't actually add private equity and tax credit investors into the same pool. It doesn't work. So we're kind of limited in where we can receive those funds from. So it's a very difficult process, which is why a lot of market rate developers say, I don't want to deal with that. And but yeah, there's a lot of different funds that are being allocated right now, and hopefully Congress passes some bill in the next 6 weeks, along with infrastructure, which will also have housing dollars associated with it, and we can get there.
So I would say we go with the recommendation that the city council review this, weigh in all the options, and then make a decision. Is that good direction?
That's
For you,
perfect.
Debbie?
I'm fine with that. Let's move it to the council.
Right, and then Christina, do you need a vote on that, or we just needed to give direction?
I believe staff is just looking for direction and a recommendation.
Great. Very clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then with that, I think agenda item number 4 is adjournment till the next regularly scheduled Finance Committee meeting, which is October 25th, 2021. Bye. We're all done. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Good evening.